Howdy my totally always tubular gamers, and we're back with, you guessed it, another ranking video. And today we're going to be talking about the Like a Dragon series, formerly known as Yakuza. Today we're going to be looking at the Like a Dragon spin-off. Now the Like a Dragon series, I don't know how much of an introduction it needs these days. It really is Sega's predominant franchise. It seemingly is past Sonic even, is really just their main series. We've got well over 15 Like a Dragon games. The series really has received its worldwide recognition that I truly believe it deserves. I remember being out here hoping Yakuza 5 comes to the West on PS3, but no. Now the series has blown up and it's popular everywhere. It's crazy now. There's tons of games. We're getting all the games day one with the Japanese release date. There's even English dubs. The series is more popular now than ever before, and as a longtime fan, it's really great to see. But over the years, there's actually been a number of Like a Dragon spin-offs. While obviously there's a bunch of numbered titles, there has been a few titles that aren't numbered, that aren't part of that main series, but are very much in the Yakuza Like a Dragon franchise. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. You know, with the latest release of Like a Dragon Gaiden, I thought, why not do a video where I look at all the spin-offs in this series? And so that's really what we're talking about today. Now, for the unfamiliar, the spin-offs in the Like a Dragon series are Yakuza Dead Souls, Judgment, its sequel Lost Judgment, Fist of the Northstar, Lost Paradise, Like a Dragon Ishin, and then of course Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name. And so those are the games we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be giving each one of them a little review, stacking them up against each other, which ones are worth playing, which ones are just worth watching the cutscenes, and which ones are actually really great. That's what we're going to find out today. Outside of Dead Souls, I played all of these games at release. I'm a huge Yakuza Like a Dragon fan. I've been a fan for many years now. It's actually this series that I got into ranking videos when I ranked this series many years ago. And for those asking me to rank every single Like a Dragon game, trust me, it's coming. I just want to wait for the release of Infinite Wealth, though. That game looks super hype. So today we're just talking the spin-offs. And so enough dilly-dallying. Let me know what you think down below. Let me know what your favorite Like a Dragon Yakuza game is, why you agree with my opinion, why I'm just stupid and have way too many hot takes, or why I have the coldest take imaginable. Like, share, comment, subscribe. We got the super thanks and Patreon going on. Any support is greatly appreciated. And so let's just get right into it. Of these games, which do I think is the weakest? And here we have Yakuza Dead Souls, releasing for the PS3 in 2012. Now, funny story with Dead Souls, this was actually the first Yakuza game I ever tried. I've tried it like a year or two after it came out in high school and went, yeah, this isn't very good, but you know, this series might be cool, so I'll check out one of the older entries, and then I very much fell in love with the series. But Dead Souls, yeah, no, I wasn't falling in love with anything here. So Dead Souls is a non-canon spin-off that takes place after Yakuza 4 and sees a sudden zombie outbreak spread throughout Kamurocho, and a number of our classic Yakuza characters all team up to take on the zombies and figure out what the hell's going on. Now, the first time I played this game, I thought the story was pretty stupid and a bit nonsensical. After playing all of the Yakuza games, yeah, I think it's still pretty stupid and nonsensical. Like, it's pretty out there, and zombies, it's a fun idea for a spin-off in this series, but this story is just so all over the place. And while there are plenty of great moments, plenty of humorous moments, especially with Majima, I just really couldn't bring myself to like the story all that much. Now, when it comes to the main four characters that are playable in this game, there's Kiryu, everybody knows him. There's Akiyama from Yakuza 4. There's Ryuji Goda from Yakuza 2, the main antagonist, who's somehow alive and supporting a robot arm. And then, for the first time in the series, at least in a playable debut, there's Majima. And I'll just immediately say, it's very cool you get to play as Ryuji and Majima. However, this game plays nothing like the Yakuza games you know and love. This game is a very linear third-person shooter, and not a very good one at that. But what the gameplay really consists of is you moving A to B through a destroyed Kamurocho, shooting basically everything that moves. You'll fight plenty of different enemies in this game. While of course there are tons of zombies, there's plenty of other monsters that look straight ripped out of Resident Evil. Like, there's some really weird looking monsters in this game, and yeah, you're just gonna shoot them all dead. The structure of this game is very similar to Yakuza 4, where you'll play through a couple chapters as each character, then they all come together at the very end, and then you beat the game. What is cool is while all four characters control the same, they each have their own unique weapons. So Kiryu is like a sniper, Majima is a shotgun, Goda has his machine gun arm, and Akiyama has pistols. So at least all four characters do play a little differently from each other. But on the subject of controls, let's talk about the controls. This is probably the biggest issue with Dead Souls. I remember the first time I tried this, I just went, what the fuck are these controls? And looking back, what are these controls? These are just terrible. This is really like my biggest issue with the game. Like 10 plus years later, I'm still just baffled as to what they were thinking with the controls. You would think this game just controls like a normal third-person shooter or similar to, say, Resident Evil, but it doesn't. The control scheme is incredibly unintuitive, awkward, and just clunky, and I never really got a good grasp on the controls, and because of that, the game just never really felt all that nice to play. It just kind of felt like I was clumsily running around shooting everything, and I'm sure you can get used to these controls and even like them at some point, but I really just could not get behind these controls at all. Controls aside, like I said, you'll just be running around these relatively linear environments killing everything. There are a few set pieces here, there's some boss fights, they give you some cool weapons like a flamethrower that are limited use. There's still plenty of cutscenes, and there are safe areas where it is a little bit more open, and there are actually sub-stories to do and people to help, and some mini-games here, but nowhere near as many as the main series. The main focus of this game really is just killing everything. And unfortunately, I just really could not get into this game. Like I mentioned, I couldn't get behind the story, but the gameplay is just not fun, it's not exciting or challenging or engaging. The gunplay doesn't feel nice like at all. I didn't really care for the set pieces, and it was just kind of a dull experience, and it's missing a bunch of the things that make the Yakuza and Like a Dragon games so loved. All the quirky side missions, there's barely any here. The story is just kind of whatever. And the cool hand-to-hand combat is nowhere to be found outside of one very small segment. Like, the game just doesn't have a lot going for it. Presentation-wise, this game is terrible. For 2012, this did not look good, and the game doesn't have memorable music either. You know what the most memorable thing about this game is to me? Is that the game sold like shit, to the point where Sega went, I don't think we're going to be releasing the Yakuza games in the West anymore. Like, Dead Souls sold horribly, we're just going to stick it to Japan. And it wasn't until many years later where Sony pushed Sega to release Yakuza 5 on the PS3, and then Yakuza 0 on PS4, and then, the series blew up, and it is what it is today. And so, for that alone, Dead Souls can just get bent, fuck right off, flush down the toilet, just get out of my life. There's a reason this game has never been re-released. It's because it's not very good. I know some people like it, but I have never liked this game. And it's sad because I bought this game for like $5 like 10 years ago, and it's worth like $70, $80, $100 now. People go, ooh, the rare unre-released Yakuza game. No, if you're like a major Yakuza Like a Dragon fan and you want to get all the games, I still wouldn't recommend this one. Look up the cutscenes if you're really that interested, but otherwise, you could just steer clear of this game. And here we have Fist of the Northstar Lost Paradise releasing for the PS4 in 2018. Now, this game might not have Yakuza or Like a Dragon in the title, but trust me, it is very much in the style of those games. Kiryu's even an unlockable skin. It's also by RGG. It shares a lot of the same gameplay and mechanics as the Like a Dragon series, and when it came out, I remember people going, yeah, this is just a Yakuza game with a Fist of the Northstar paint, and they're not really all that far off. Now, the first thing I want to preface is that I'm not huge on Fist of the Northstar. I've never seen it. I know like a bunch of the memes, I know the general story, and I've played through this game, but I would not consider myself some super huge Fist of the Northstar fan, and maybe that affects the placement of this game, but I just always thought this game was alright. Now, when it comes to the world and story of this game, it very much does take place in the Fist of the Northstar world, and it's about our man Kenshiro trying to find his beloved in just this awful wasteland. Now, the plot of this game, I don't know. I never really was that huge on it either. I think it's because I'm not a mega fan of Fist of the Northstar. I'm sure if I was, then I'd be going, ooh, I know that, I love that, these are great throwbacks, I like that character, etc. But as someone who's not really a big fan of it, I was just like, yeah, the story's alright, I guess. Yeah, it's cool. Kenshiro's alright, and he can really do some crazy shit. And speaking of crazy shit, we have the gameplay. When it comes to the combat, this game, just look at it. Yeah, it's basically a Like a Dragon game. It still very much is a third-person beat-em-up where you just beat the absolute snot out of people. Something that the combat focuses on in this game rather than combos is the hidden channeling points, which is one of the main elements of Fist of the Northstar, where you'll be able to hit people in certain points and basically just make them blow up, or Kenshiro will just go absolutely nuts. The combat in this game, yeah, I think it's alright. Seeing Kenshiro go nuts is satisfying, and people blowing up is never going to get old. I think the way they implemented the hidden channel stuff, I think it's good, and the quick time events aren't annoying here. I think these are well implemented, and the combat, for the most part, it's fun. Now, this game has more to it, though, than combat. You are still in a relatively open world. This game is much more open than the other Yakuza games. There's like this city environment you can roam around in, and there's subquests and of course the main missions, but there's actually this big open world you can explore in the car, and you can freely drive around this big apocalyptic open world. Now, I'll just be real, I never like the open world of this game. The city with the sub-stories is like half decent, but this big open world that you drive around with, there's just not much going on here. You can pick up materials, get into fights, and find some little secrets here and there, but I really didn't like this open world. It just felt too open and empty for its own good, and I just got kind of bored driving around in it. That and the driving didn't feel very good in this game. The driving's certainly better in like Yakuza 5. Like the rest of the Like a Dragon series, there are some optional minigames you can play here that are different from the rest of the Yakuza series, and of course you can play Sega games. For some reason, Outrun and Space Harrier are even in Fist of the Northstar. Now, something different that Lost Paradise has from the other Yakuza games is it really does have an emphasis on role-playing elements. Like, enemies show up with their levels on screen. You know, every Yakuza game has you leveling up and acquiring new skills, but here there's like actual stats, and if you're a low level, you're not going to do shit to some of these enemies, especially the bosses, and so you'll actually have to really level up. And I'll just be honest, this game is really grindy. I was shocked with just how grindy it was. In any of the other Like a Dragon games up until this point, I never had to grind. I never just had to go defeat random dudes, but here you're gonna have to grind, otherwise the bosses are gonna whoop your ass. Another element it focuses on is crafting. You'll have to craft like new gear and attachments. You'll have to find materials out in the world, and I just didn't really care for this. I didn't think it was all that well implemented, and it felt kind of grindy also. Now, crafting is also not new for the Like a Dragon series. It would actually stick around, like it was in Like a Dragon Ishin, but it's so much better in Ishin. It's way better done in Ishin than it is here. I just didn't really like the crafting. I didn't like the role-playing elements, and it felt kind of shoehorned in. I think it really disrupted this game's flow, and maybe I just wanted to play this game like a straight action game and wasn't ready for all these role-playing elements, but man, this game just did not flow well for me. The pacing wasn't great, and I just didn't have a great time with this game. Like, it's still good, the combat is still good, and there are fun elements to it, but I didn't love it. At least from a presentation standpoint, I think it looks pretty decent. It looks like the manga it's based off of. Look, if you love the Yakuza Like a Dragon games and haven't tried this game at some point, but you've played like all the other games in the series, yeah, I think it's worth playing. I can recommend this game to people who love Fist of the Northstar first and foremost, and people who like Yakuza second, but other than that, yeah, you could probably just skip it. And strangely enough, this game is still exclusive to PS4, and I doubt it's leaving the PS4 anytime soon. Look, I've heard some people say this game's really underrated, but I've always just thought this game was okay. And here we have Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name, releasing in 2023. Now, this game is very interesting. While it's not a mainline title, it very much continues on from the main games and leads into other main games. The game takes place in between Yakuza 6 and 7. You know, I'm going to try my best to not spoil anything here. I'm just going to say some shit goes down at the end of Yakuza 6 and Kiryu needs to disappear. And so he gives up his name and he's working for like some secret government agency. And that's all I'm going to say. The story in this game is alright. I'm not going to say this is one of the best stories in the Like a Dragon franchise, or one of the most unpredictable, engaging storylines, because it's not. You know, I played Yakuza Like a Dragon. This game really is all about leading into that game. I know what happens, and sure, there are a few twists and turns I didn't see coming, and a few parts where I actually did raise an eyebrow, and the ending is particularly powerful. I really just thought the story was alright for the most part, and it doesn't reach the highs that some of the other Yakuza games reach. At least the characters in this game are good. They introduce a number of new characters, and I thought they were pretty decent to alright. I mean, Kiryu at this point, it doesn't really matter what he's in, he's just going to be great and legendary. I mean, he's Kiryu. Part of me does feel a little conflicted though. Like, Kiryu had a great send-off, a great conclusion to his story, and it seemed like it was going to be all about Ichiban going forward, but no, Kiryu's here, he's still the main character, and they're still continuing forward with him, and I don't know, I just really like the send-off that he got. The story, yeah, it's alright. Now when it comes to the gameplay, it doesn't feel crazy different from previous Like a Dragon games. I'd say it's most comparable to Yakuza 6. It is not turn-based, it is still real-time beat-em-up combat, and it sees Kiryu primarily in the Sotenbori district. You do occasionally go back to Injinsho, and you actually get to go to this new area known as the Castle, which is this cool ship. But most of the game really is in Sotenbori, so fans of Yakuza 2, 0, 5, the many times that this place has shown up are gonna like the map. And you know, it's for the most part the same, but they did add a few things here, like a pocket circuit racing club. That's cool. But anyway, enough about the open world. How's the combat in this game? It's very smooth. It feels really nice. There's two styles you get in this game. Kiryu has his typical brawler style that he's known for, but he has this new style known as Agent. And this new style is pretty different from what he's had in the past. Part of it feels like Rush from Yakuza 0, but he has all these high-tech gadgets to help him now, and some of these are pretty cool. You know, you can be James Bond out here boosting around, throwing explosive cigarettes, calling in drones. It's unique and I do like the style. I think it is cool. I think it does make the gameplay a little bit more varied, as the other style, the Yakuza style, it really is what you've been using for a long time now. The heat moves are just as solid as they were before, and stomping in dudes' faces, yeah, it's just as good as it was in the previous games. It feels really smooth, it's satisfying, the enemies react to when you beat their ass. There's status effects, there's some depth here, there's even some challenge here. This game really is not messing around. It wants you to have played the previous Yakuza or Like a Dragon games, and it'll just start throwing a ton of enemies at you pretty much from the get-go and start throwing in people with guns real quick. But for the most part, I really did enjoy the combat. It feels at this point like they've refined and just basically perfected the combat to such a T that I don't even know what else they can add to it. Sure, it doesn't have as much depth as other Like a Dragon games since there's only 2 styles versus say 4, but I never thought it got repetitive or stale or really got old, and one of the reasons I think that is because the game isn't super long. Now don't get it twisted, this isn't Modern Warfare 3 where it's like 3 or 4 hours long. This game is still a solid 9 to 12 hours, but compared to the other Like a Dragon games, that's not that long. This is one of the shortest Like a Dragon games. I think the only one that's shorter is probably Dead Souls, or maybe one of the original two, and while this game doesn't have a ton of length to it, I think it still does have quality. You know, the story is really straightforward, it's engaging, the combat is still fun, there is still an open world to explore, there's plenty of side content, all of the stuff from the previous games shows up. They've added more arcade games like Daytona 2 here. I don't see nearly enough people popping off from the fact that Daytona 2 has finally been ported to home consoles and it's in this game. This is a great port. Daytona 2 is great. If you play this game, sit down for 20-30 minutes, play some Daytona 2. You won't regret it. Trust me, the game slaps. But what I'm trying to say is there is a lot of side content here, and if you choose to do it, you can easily double how much time you spend with this game. This isn't some quick 8-hour game that you're done with and there's nothing else to it. There really is a bunch of side content. All the sub-stories are locked to this character named Akame who helps Kiryu. And while I don't think the sub-stories are as good as previous Like a Dragon games, I think they're still alright. There's a really cool one that involves Lost Judgment that I absolutely think is worth doing. I mean, if you're going to play through this game, you do have to do a few side quests at one point to continue the main story. You have to level up Akame's network, and so just do the Lost Judgment side mission. You won't be disappointed. It's the best side mission. A majority of these are kind of fetch questy and don't feel anywhere near as involved as previous Like a Dragon games, but yeah, like I said, they're alright, and you know, that's kind of the general feeling I feel about this game. It's alright. Look, it isn't amazing, it isn't one of the best Like a Dragon games. It still very much is a good game. It's just some of the other Like a Dragon games are like crazy good. The presentation I thought was pretty decent to good. You know, it's really nice that the Like a Dragon games look as good as they do now. I mean, I remember Yakuza 3 and 4 and Dead Souls where I was like, this game looks like shit. But nowadays, yeah, the series looks good. It runs really well on the computer. It's on Game Pass, which I thought was crazy. And I can easily say if you like the other Like a Dragon games, you're going to like this game. Is it a little bit formulaic? Absolutely, but it's still a good time. Apparently the game was only made in like 6 months as well. According to sources, it was made in a very short time span, and this is how you make a game in a very short time span, so Modern Warfare 3 can take some notes. But in conclusion, I think the game is still good and it is still worth playing. The last thing I'm going to say though is there's no physical version of this game in the West. Physical forever. We don't want this game lost to time. So I guess go play it before it's gone. Again, it's on Game Pass and it gets a thumbs up from me. And here we have Judgment, which released for the PS4 in 2019 but has since been released on plenty of other platforms. So while this game does take place in the Like a Dragon world and there have been small crossovers with the Yakuza games, it very much is still its own standalone spin-off. It stars a new protagonist known as Yagami, and he runs a detective agency with his best friend Kaito. And the two of them are investigating a case that is very, very personal to Yagami. I actually thought the story in this game was really well done. It's really cool to see the other side of the law rather than, you know, helping the Yakuza or just tolerating them. You're against them. You're the law. You're the police. And I thought it was a really cool dynamic. It's a really great crime drama. And the best part of this story is the characters. You know, I didn't really know how attached I'd get to these characters. I'm like, oh, Kiryu's not here. A bunch of the classics aren't here. But Yagami, Kaito, a bunch of the characters here, they're actually really memorable, well done, funny, interesting, and have some real depth here. The story, it's got some really interesting twists and turns, and it is very different from the other Like a Dragon games. Of course, you know, there's going to be some similarities here and there, but it very much is its own different, unique tale. And I'd argue it's the strongest aspect of this game. I was very engaged with the game's story pretty much the entire time. You also don't need to have played any of the other Like a Dragon games. You can jump right into this game and understand it from the beginning to the end. But if you have played the Like a Dragon games, the gameplay is going to feel relatively familiar. You know, you're dropped into this big open world of Kamurocho. You've got your main story and investigation, but there's a bunch of side investigations, sub-stories, mini-games to play, and of course people to beat the shit out of. The combat is pretty by the numbers for a Like a Dragon game where you just beat the absolute shit out of basically everybody. Yagami does have a completely unique moveset that is different from all other Yakuza characters, and he does some pretty cool shit in this game. Like, he has some pretty awesome heat moves that are satisfying to pull off and just fun to watch, like when he absolutely just dunks on fools. But of course he does have some cop maneuvers. The combat, I think it's pretty decent to good in this game. Now, speaking of being on the right side of the law, there are a few things Yagami does that Kiryu would never do or be capable of doing. Like maintaining a girlfriend in this game. Oh, I really went there. Yeah, you can actually have a girlfriend and a relationship in this game, and it's just a side activity, but it's still kind of funny and cool that you can do that. But seriously, there are a few things Talk can actually do here, and it's my biggest issue with this game. See, what Talk will end up doing a lot of the time is investigations, and there's a bunch of different gameplay styles that show up towards these investigations. Some of it is just straight detective work. You know, you're investigating an area, piecing clues together, deducing that classic detective work, and while I don't think this is that bad, it's a little too scripted in my opinion. You have to go in an exact order rather than just finding stuff naturally, and I just didn't find it all that fun. And speaking of not all that fun, we have the stealth. Really, this is just kind of silly where you're just tailing people, and what it amounts to is someone slowly walking forward, you following them and hiding behind stuff for a few minutes, and then it's over. This was not engaging, challenging, or fun. I also didn't like the drone missions. I didn't think the controls were all that great, and I found them relatively dull. You know, it's not uncommon for Like a Dragon games to throw in other gameplay elements and gameplay styles here, but they don't force them as hard as this game does, which really does push them. And it just detracts from my experience. I didn't really care all that much for these, and I thought it kind of messed with the flow. Maybe it's because these were a lot slower paced than the rest of the game, but it just wasn't for me. Maybe that's a hot take, but that really is how I feel, and I'm never not going to be 100% honest with you guys. That's just how I feel. I wasn't huge on these. At least the game looks nice, the presentation was solid enough, and the open world is just as fun to explore as it was in any of the other Like a Dragon games. You can just wander kind of aimlessly for hours on end, getting yourself involved in quirky activities or playing these rather fun mini games that are honestly way better than any of the detective work you actually have to do. But seriously, I think the game is good. I think it's actually rather good. While I don't love certain aspects of it, I can still really appreciate the story, the combat, and what this game is trying to do. It really does present a unique spin on the Like a Dragon formula. And I think fans of the Like a Dragon series will absolutely eat this shit up, but I can also recommend this game to people who might not love the Like a Dragon games. You know, it is a unique enough spin that I'm like, this might bring in new fans. Regardless though, it gets a thumbs up from me, and I have no problem recommending it. And here we have Lost Judgment releasing in 2021. Now, Lost Judgment was the first Like a Dragon game, spin-offs included, to ever be released day and day in Japan and the West, which was pretty awesome. And you know, I think this game is pretty good. While I don't absolutely love it like some people do or think it's one of the very best in the Like a Dragon franchise, I still think it is a good game and a step up from the original Judgment. Now, when it comes to this game's premise, it takes place after the first Judgment and sees Yagami and Kaito heading to Yokohama to investigate a bullying problem, and I'll just leave it at that. The story gets a lot more interesting and takes a lot more interesting twists and turns than just a simple bullying problem. Now, the story in this game, look, this might be one of my hotter takes, but I never really cared all that much for the story. I actually think the first Judgment has a better story and better characters. The story is good here, it is interesting, and it is relatively unpredictable, but I just was never all that engrossed with the story. I didn't think it was all that memorable. I thought the antagonist was really weak, and I just didn't get hella into it like I did with, say, the first game. I've heard some people say this is one of the best stories in the entire Like a Dragon franchise, but it really just didn't resonate with me. At least it is very unique. It's very different from all the other games in this entire franchise. It definitely stands out. Alright, if you're still watching and I totally haven't pissed you off, let's talk about the gameplay. You know, it's not all that different from the first Judgment. Real surprising stuff here. You get two open worlds to explore. You get Kamurocho as you always do, but you also get Yokohama from Yakuza 7, and it's cool you can explore both of these. I think these are both pretty good open worlds, and what do? You do what you always do in these games. You can do the main missions or the main investigation, but but there's a bunch of quirky sub-stories, there's some funny little mini-games, you can go play all the classic Sega games and really just explore to your heart's content. You even get a skateboard to traverse around, and that's cool. You know, skateboard always gonna get a thumbs up from me. We love our skateboarding in games. Oh, and as always, there's plenty of people trying to oppose you, stop you, kick you into the ground, rip your neck off, shit down your neck, sell your organs on the black market, piss off your dog, whatever it is they're trying to do. You're gonna get into a lot of fights here. And the combat, I think, is some of the best combat of the Like a Dragon franchise. It's not turn-based, it still is real-time, and it does incorporate some of the styles from the other Yakuza games, and I think it actually feels really nice. Taka's plenty of different styles and unique movesets to just absolutely wipe the floor with these dudes. The combat is satisfying, it's engaging, it has a really nice flow to it, and I thought that it was relatively fun. Like, stomping fools' heads into the ground is just never gonna get old in this franchise. It really isn't. And when it comes to the open world, there's more activities to do than ever before. Tak can still have relationships, and there's plenty of quirky little sub-stories you'll come across. In fact, some of the best sub-stories are actually in this game. In fact, some of the best gameplay of the entire franchise is in this game. Like, when it's good, it's really good. Unfortunately, they brought over some stuff from the first Judgment, i.e. all the other gameplay styles, and it's just really not that good in this game. Look, the detective work, it's a little better in this game. It's not as mind-numbing as the first games, but the other gameplay styles that they bring in, like when you parkour, or when you're in the drone, or when you're being stealthy, or you're tailing someone, this is not fun, this is not engaging. I just was bored. It feels just as clunky, just as shoehorned in as the first games, and I just didn't enjoy it. It took me kind of out of it, it messed with the pacing, it disrupted this game's awesome flow, and same thing goes for the chases, man. I just never really liked the chases in these games. Like, it sounds kind of funny to say, but I actually want less variety. I don't want these extra gameplay styles. It reminds me of 3D platformers that have a bunch of shoehorned in mini games. Like, these just aren't all that well developed, they're not fun, and I don't think they add anything to the game, and they're very prevalent throughout the game. Now, I'm not going to be super harsh on this game like I was a couple years ago. I think the game still has really good gameplay and alright story, a solid presentation, a kick-ass soundtrack. Like, the music is really fire in this game, a really great open world, some good combat, but man, these gameplay styles are just not it for me. They really are not it, and I don't like that the game forces you to do so many parts that aren't just running around in the open world or beating the shit out of people. That's what this game does best, and that's what I think it should focus on. The other gameplay styles, you know, make them optional. Make it for all the optional investigations you do. I don't want it in the main story, but here we are, there's plenty in the main story, and it really did mess with my flow. At this point, I'm going off on a tangent, so I'm gonna just call it. If you like Judgment, if you like the Like a Dragon games, you're going to enjoy this game. You're going to very much enjoy this game. If you can get past all of the other gameplay styles, I think you'll love this game. It'll be one of your favorites. I couldn't get past it, but I still very much did enjoy my time with the game, and I have no problem recommending it. And so here we have Like a Dragon Ishin finally coming to the West in 2023 with a remake of the original game. You know, that original game, I remember seeing it in Japan and watching videos on it going, man, this would be so cool to play if it ever came over here or not. I'm shocked it did. I really am shocked. And after playing through the entire game, oh man, this game is so good. I'm so glad it came over here. This is, in my opinion, the best of the Like a Dragon spin-offs and one of my favorite Like a Dragon games in general. The setting, story, and characters is wholly unique and totally different from the other Like a Dragon games, taking place way earlier in history. The game takes place in the late Edo period from years 1853 to 1867, and you play as Sakamoto Ryoma, who really isn't just going through some shit, but a lot of shit. He's embroiled in a coup d'etat and is bent on finding this murderer who assassinates his father figure through any means necessary. The story is incredibly interesting, again, very different from all the other Like a Dragon games, and it's just one of the most unique stories I've ever seen in a game. Like, this setting is so rarely seen in games that it's cool when it just even shows up. I really enjoy the setting, I enjoy the story of this game, the plot twist, the characters, where it goes. I think it's actually really well done, and the characters are great in this game. Obviously, they all use Like a Dragon character models, but they very much are different characters. They actually play historical figures for the most part, and it's really cool to see them come to life through some of our favorite Yakuza characters. Something worth bringing up is that this game has a lot of cutscenes, especially at the beginning of the game. The first few hours, you barely play this game. You're watching cutscenes, and so it's a good thing the story is as good as it is. Like, it's complex, it's enduring, it's got great characters, great moments, and I was thoroughly intrigued, engaged, and interested. Like, I really enjoyed the story of this game. Now when it comes to the gameplay, this is where it's more like a traditional Like a Dragon game, where you're dropped into this open world and you can pretty much do whatever you want. There's some main missions, there's plenty of side missions, you can go partake in some little activities here and there, and of course you'll get into plenty of fights. Now this might come as a really big surprise, but Kamurocho's not in this game. It is nowhere to be found. You didn't expect that, and you also want to subscribe. But it takes place in the streets of Kyo, and you know, Kyo isn't that big of an open world. It's nowhere near as big as Kamurocho or plenty of the other Yakuza games open worlds, but what this game has over the others is it's very dense. What it lacks in size, it makes up for in quality and interactivity. You can interact with nearly every store. You can interact with almost the entire map. And it's not like it's just a bunch of restaurants here. There's actually a lot going on with this open world, and there's a lot of variety with the shops you can go in, and they all offer something different. And it's good that this open world is as good as it is, because you'll find yourself running around quite a bit. Like, you go back and forth a number of times in this open world. Something else you do frequently in this game is get into combat. The combat is pretty different from most of the other Like a Dragon games. I'd say it's the most similar to like Yakuza 0 with the different styles. Obviously you only play as Ryoma here, but he has 4 completely unique styles with totally different movesets. There's Swordsman, which uses the katana as a primary weapon, Gunman, which uses pistols, Brawler, where it's more hand-to-hand and traditional, and then the Wild Dancer, which is a combination of the katana and pistol. My favorite was definitely Wild Dancer. Like, this shit was so cool, where you just slice people up and then gun them down. I spent most of the game in Wild Dancer, but the other styles are nothing to scoff at, except Brawler. I just didn't really find any use for Brawler, but I enjoy how different the 4 styles are from each other, and you can have totally different play styles. And as you continue through the story, defeat enemies, complete quests, etc., etc., you can learn new sword techniques. You actually have to go learn them, which is an interesting twist, but once you learn a bunch of these new sword techniques, the combat gets a lot more varied, and it's a good thing it does, because you'll find yourself in a lot of combat in this game. But I really enjoyed the combat. I would argue that this is some of the best combat the series has ever seen. It's got variety, it's impactful, it's fun, it's satisfying. They mix it up with different enemy types. It does get challenging, especially at the end. Some of the enemies can really kick your shit in, like the 12-foot tall people. But I really did enjoy it. Other than getting into combat, watching cutscenes, and interacting with people, there is a bunch of sub-stories to do here. There's plenty of side missions, and there's a bunch of quirky little mini-games you can get into. Karaoke even shows up here somehow. Gambling even shows up, because of course it has to. There's even some really big side quests you get in this game, like the Battle Dungeon, which is like this whole dungeon crawling mode which uses these special cards. And this at times feels like a game in a game, like you could spend just hours in this mode alone. There's even Another Life, which is another large side quest where Ryoma must pay off the debts of Haruka, a girl in debt due to illness, and what this is like farming. It's an actual farming game. And wouldn't you know it, it's actually pretty decent. There is plenty of side content in this game. You could easily double your game time just doing all the side content in this game. And unlike most modern games, the side content is actually just straight quality here. I really enjoyed the side content as well. I thought it was almost as good as the main content. Sure, there aren't epic set pieces or giant bosses, but there's still some really cool stuff, and the rewards you get are totally worth it. In addition to leveling up, crafting is kind of a focus here, and you get plenty of crafting materials and money for doing the side content. You'll want to be crafting a bunch of new armor, gear, etc., because the game, like I mentioned, it does get pretty challenging. The crafting in this game, though, is much better than the Fist of the Northstar game. It's just better implemented, it makes more sense, it's more intuitive, and I just enjoyed it more. I enjoyed crafting in this game and getting the materials. In fact, there's not really a lot I disliked with the game. Sure, some of the enemies do feel rather cheap, and a few bosses just will absolutely kick your shit in if you're not doing even a little grinding or crafting materials, but if worse comes to worse, you can just buy a bunch of healing items and spam those. That always is going to work in these games, but seriously, this game is not messing around. This is one of the most challenging Like a Dragon games, and I've heard people not like it because they just said, oh, it's really cheap and the enemies whoop your ass, but it didn't really affect my enjoyment all that much. But again, I was doing the side content, and doing the side content, this is a pretty lengthy, substantial game. This isn't a quick 15-20 hour game. This is like a 40-50 hour game doing even some of the side content, but man, it's actually paced really well. The flow is great, and it really just proves what I knew all along, that this game was really good and it needed to come to the West, and I'm so glad it's finally here. You know, it runs on Unreal Engine. It looks decent. I'm not going to say it looks amazing. The frame rate at least was fine. The controls are nice. And the story's incredibly engaging. Like, I have zero problem recommending this game to anybody that likes the Like a Dragon games. You like beat 'em ups, you're looking for a game with a different setting. This game has it. You know, there's been a lot of amazing games in 2023, and it's really easy to forget that this game came out in 2023, but it's one of my favorite games of 2023 is Like a Dragon Ishin. What a great game. But that's it for today's video. You know, we talked a couple Like a Dragon games. I'll be back in a few months to talk about the entire series once Infinite Wealth is out. I'm really excited for that. And yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. If you made it to this part of the video, comment Hamtaro, as in that old anime series. Hope everyone has a wonderful day, night, whatever's the closest to you. See ya.